future expectations and imagined probabilities feels so much longer than it was before. I'm talking like I can plan things for 15 years. Like, oh, this is what I want to be doing in 15 years. 3 years ago, you could have asked me where I saw myself in 5 years, and I had no idea. You know, I didn't. It was one of the most like uncomfortable questions. It's like 5 years, but now the horizon seems farther away, which is exciting. Now, when I think about Nova and Escher, I think about creating a safe, like the safest, most nurturing field of probability around them that I can, that it's within my domain to do. And it's great. I don't know. There's something that feels like this is what I should be thinking about. And it feels good to think like that.
Greetings, future fossils. This is Michael Garfield welcoming you to another episode of the podcast that explores our place in time. This week we have a very exciting guest for you on the show, Android Jones, an artist whose iconic imagery of digitally reimagined wisdom traditions and the far reaches of human potential have ended up everywhere from the Smithsonian Museum to the side of the Sydney Opera House. Android is somebody I've known for a while. I'm honored to consider a friend, someone who has not abandoned his skill and mastery in pursuit of the visionary new horizons of technological creative expression, and someone whom I've had the pleasure of watching become a father over the last few years. I love seeing his partner Martha and their children at festivals. It's really inspiring to me as someone who has long hoped that there is room for a family in the non-ordinary path I choose to cut for myself. Android's latest project, in collaboration with the visionary programmer Anson Fong, is Microdose VR, which is this remarkable, immersive, creative sandbox where you get to wish ephemeral, gorgeous particle animations into form and sculpt these glorious temporary cathedrals in midair. It's a profoundly psychedelic experience. And if it's any indication of the path that creative technology is taking in this century, then the world of art and wonder and creative flow space is going to open up for a lot of people in the next few years. I wanted to give Android a different kind of conversation than the one he's used to. So this talk has a lot to do with how he understands his role as a father and an artist and a psychonaut together, how the analog and digital differ in their utility when he's teaching art to his kids, what happens at the challenging intersection between ever more accessible and democratic forms of creative instruments and the proliferation of intense new forms of learning and mastery. It's a great conversation for episode 111. But first I want to give a thanks to Michael Gaio, the newest Patreon supporter, and the rest of the 135 or so people chipping in a couple bucks a month to keep this podcast afloat. It's for sure the best way to get in with me and a learning community of listeners involved in much more direct, immediate, rewarding conversation, I think, than is possible simply listening to this on your commute or whatever you do, which of course is awesome and wonderful. But if you would like to take it a step deeper and get involved in our book club and access all of the patrons only stuff that I've put up in there, I do everything I can to make sure that you all know how deeply grateful I am for your support of this show. Also, a thanks to everyone who has been reviewing this show on iTunes or wherever you're listening to it. It makes a huge difference in terms of the kind of guests that I'm capable of luring onto the program. You know, the more reviews I stack up, the better this show can be. So if you haven't already and you have a minute, please pop on over and say some kind things about this show in public. It makes a big difference. While on the subject of concerted community action, I encourage everybody to go check out knowyourmeme.com. My buddy Mike Schwab, this show's current featured sponsor, works for this really cool community project where people have been cataloging the histories of various web memes. New media must always suffer the burden of being regarded as lowbrow, but regardless, we have a rather scholarly conversation emerging around these lovely and novel fruits of remix culture. So if you've ever wanted to know the origins of the distracted boyfriend meme, or you want to see a graduate level historic breakdown of Scumbag Steve, or you have some vital contribution to the ongoing study of popular web media, you too can be a contributor at knowyourmeme.com, and I think it's a really cool site, and I encourage you to check it out. Lastly, we have now over 1,600 people in the Facebook group for Future Fossils. This is where I share all kinds of interesting articles and news items and cool artworks. And it really has just sort of taken over my Facebook life. There's a lot of amazing folks in there sharing wonderful stuff on a regular basis. So the group has become a nexus of surprise and delight for me as well. And I hope that if you still have the stomach for using Facebook, that you'll join us in there, because it's a good place to get into conversation with some other curious, hungry, intelligent, thoughtful people like Android Jones. So enjoy this episode. So before we begin, any important updates or announcements or anything we should emphasize here?
On the 21st of this month, doing our first Microdose VR workshop at our Wisdom complex in Los Angeles on the 21st.
Cool.
I guess that is the only upcoming things, and yeah.
Cool. Hey, your mic sounds kind of crinkly. Is that
Let me see. I'm on
or maybe it's just your coat. I don't know. Is
that better?
Oh yeah, that's much better.
Man, it's this Sony headset. It's so a couple centimeters moving it left or right. I think it's just really sensitive.
Oh, good. Well, you're just gonna have to keep your head perfectly still for the whole conversation. Sure. No, don't do that. Well, all right, man. Let's do this.
Yeah, congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, welcome on board Future Fossils. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since I realized it was almost certainly going to happen after I had my kid, and that it would be the first Dad on Dad episode of Future Fossils.
Oh, this is Dad on Dad? Okay, great.
Well, I mean, it's just you've been interviewed so many times, but to my knowledge, I don't know that you have ever had a conversation about parenthood and how that sort of changes your identity as an artist or doesn't, or those kind of things. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of where my head's at. So yeah, man. As you know, this is a show where we embed the conversation in the biggest possible, not just long but deep and wide now. So I think the place I'd like to start is with your delicious self-definition of your work as electromineralism. I'd love to hear you rant about that a little, and I think that'll give us the spark plug for the rest of this discussion.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Michael. I've been looking forward to this conversation as well. I always enjoy our conversations. And electromineralism. So that was a term I coined. Man, I think I keep seeing the reminders that my web domain is about to expire on that all the time. But maybe 10 years ago, I think I stumbled upon that one, and it came from I think it was born out of a kind of a deep dissatisfaction with the term digital art, as being kind of self-described myself as a digital artist. It seemed really a very non-descriptive, vague term, and visionary artist also has some unpleasant trappings as well around that. And I just started looking at kind of art history, and a lot of art and art movements and artists would define themselves, even some contemporary artists define themselves as a watercolor artist or pastel artist. Like some artists, when the subject matter that you work in can vary and is often broad, then I find that sometimes it's easier to describe yourself based off the medium that you're using. And like I said, the digital I don't really feel like I'm going to go move digits around today. It didn't really resonate with me. And when I really started to take a kind of audit the molecular base of the medium that I'm using, I kind of realized that most of it is electricity. Everything, even from stage zero, from like the ground zero of a thought or a dream or imagination, are kind of they're imbued with these electrical impulses, and electricity keeps the monitors going and keeps the computers working, and the laptops and all the high-powered graphics cards and everything I use now. These are all highly made up of like copper and silicon and quartz and crystals and minerals. If I was going to be, I guess I could call myself like an electro mineral petrochemical artist, but the petrochemical just makes it a little too verbose. So the idea of manipulating like crystals and minerals and electricity together is more exciting to me than manipulating digits. So hence electro mineralism.
Yeah, well, there's something else in there too, which I think speaks to the fact that you're using these very modern tools to evoke, in many cases, a very ancient wisdom, or indigenous plant medicine traditions, or like Hindu spirituality, that you're kind of unmoored in using this, the digital medium to make a statement about the digital era. And there's something about the concept of electromineralism that I think also speaks to, like you were just saying, like these ideas emerge as electrical impulses. There's, all this weird 20th century Russian science from behind the Iron Curtain about, the notion that individual consciousness might just be like a harmonic of the Earth's geomagnetic patterns, that our individual memory are sort of like stored in this vaster thing. And then also this theme running through all different kinds of medicine traditions, in which initiation is about like taking the initiate apart and then placing gems and jewels and crystals and things into them. There's like a very ancient kind of cyborg strain that the modern cyborg thing only begins to touch. So, as someone with a plate in your head, I feel like that's gotta, you've probably thought about that. I'd love to hear how this sort of reflects upon your own identity and life experiences and initiations and other things that are more broader general human experiences, less focused in the current age.
I think in general, as an artist, I really love tools, all types of tools, old tools, new tools. I have a barn here in Colorado, and it's just filled with tools, and I'm always just collecting new ones. And whether it's stuff that helps me break down and manipulate or sand or shape wood or metal or vertexes, knobs and controllers, just the more the merrier. I just love how these tools act as kind of extensions of my central creative nervous system and open up new possibilities and kind of new valleys of creative probabilities. Just the access to them feels good, even if I'm using them or not using them. And often, I think there's even a lot of times when I'm working working in VR, working in Unreal or new applications or Painter or Photoshop, a lot of times it actually feels, I know it's new, but it doesn't, sometimes it even feels old. Like I feel that even like the most modern tools we have are still so much farther away from the things that I've seen in some of my visions and ceremonies. It feels like we're still just kind of rubbing sticks and stones together. I feel like there's still like I'm incredibly grateful and excited about the abundant amount of tools that are available to the contemporary artist. But yeah, there is a part of me it's never satisfied. It's always like looking for like the new thing or the new opportunity that kind of creative conscious has to express itself. So I think that's kind of that's the physical material tool side. And I think subject matter wise, one of this, I guess, something I've been attracted to, or you can kind of call it like a creative long-term strategy, is I do focus a lot of some of the narratives that I work with, like in Samskara, rooted more in the ancient past. And it's not necessarily that I have any kind of like romantic attachment to yesteryear, and it's not about it isn't even about as much trying to acknowledge the past, or it's as I'm referencing it, it's the strategy, the concept I have is not so much referencing the past. When I read the Yoga Sutras, I read these passages that I'm here in my studio reading this book that's been written, say over 7,000 years ago by yogis that were channeling, Sanskrit mantras and these gems from the inside of caves. And the knowledge within them, sometimes it seems like they are speaking like directly to me in this time. The problems I have, despite how contemporary they might feel, you open up some of the sutras and like it's like they're speaking directly to you. And for me, the experience I get from that is it just feels like these humans really tapped into a truth or a type of truth that we don't have to get into like absolute truth or eternal truth, but let's just say that this truth has real legs to it. If it was true 7,000 years ago and it's true now, and if I can create a piece of work around that truth, I'm not doing it to glorify the past. I'm doing it because I want to ensure that the piece can still have some sort of connection to people 7,000 years in the future. So I'm taking from the past in order to deliver something meaningful to the future.
There's something in there, James P. Carson's Finite and Infinite Games, where he talks about art and like the cultural activity as opposed to being the finite game of, trying to achieve merit in a system that's obsessed with its past. But the infinite game is a constant reworking and reimagining of what it is that we inherit, and a kind of open-ended, playful exercise that is more concerned about futurity, and that kind of, leaving something that will itself be reworked. But then that means that the artist is not identified primarily with social status or standing, but is tethered to this much sort of deeper appreciation for their place in this sort of cosmic evolutionary game that extends beyond human culture. So first of all, people call you android. Do you think of yourself as human, or like what does human mean to you as an artist, or how do you think of your identity within this enormous spectrum of stuff in which it seems you're quite happy to sort of collapse animal, vegetable, and mineral?
Yeah. Currently, yeah, I do definitely identify myself as a human. I haven't found anything else more relatable, at times. In kind of regards to, I think maybe some overarching, I just say kind of like the goalposts for like an art career. I think I just like to. I think my one like a kind of a wider goal is I just like to be part of the conversation, like the 6,000-year-old conversation of art history that we have. Like I like thinking that whatever I'm doing it's impossible to know how people are going to see work in the future and what kind of perspective humans will have. But I think as much as you can involve, it's a balance between like involving yourself and being part of the art that's happening right now and being part of an art community, having your art be able to influence others and being influenced by the artists around you. So there's one aspect of being semi rooted in contemporary culture, things that are going on right now. But at the same time, often I do my best to resist focusing too much of my art on the things that are on the immediate things that are happening right now. Like, for example, like I've made a couple political pieces, but I tend to shy away from political art, not because I'm trying to, maybe because I have an avoidant personality and I don't have time for the controversy of it. I don't really like I don't like typing words on the internet and getting into, philosophical, political conversations, but more so because I think it's just a lot of that work is going to be, if we do it's going to be unrelatable to the future. It's going to be things, it might create kind of like a flash, a very immediate flash right now, but will be most likely swept away. And I just say this because I was at someone's house the other day, and they had these really elaborate, very well drawn, like political cartoons of things happening at the time. And it was, I could see the themes of what was going on, but all the references they were making and the anamorphizing the people's faces with different derogatory animals of what they represented you needed cliff notes to even try to understand what this artist was communicating, because he was so focused on whoever was running for office at the time or whatever contemporary issue it was. So focusing on these broader themes, I think it gives the work a much longer shelf life, and I think it can be more universally understood or provide a larger reflective surface for more consciousness.
Speaking of reflective surfaces, I remember you were part of a panel discussion on visionary art that I moderated at Sonic Bloom Festival, like, I don't know, 2015 or something like that. And you mentioned in there, you were a man of few words, but everything you had to say, you like dropped a bomb on all of the like swaggering nonsense that everyone else was, it's just so easy to, polish our lapels thinking that, you and I have been a part of this very self-congratulatory scene for so long. And then you said something that really stuck with me, and interrupted the conversation in terms of, I think the question was around the value of art. And you said that, at least at the time, that you were trying to make artwork that reflected the viewer's own potential back to them, their own best self, like their own sort of most beautiful possible life. I can't remember exactly how you put it, but it just resituated the whole product and process as a service, and specifically in service to not just merely flattering your clients, but like coaxing them into something greater. And it feels like that's really connected to what you're saying just now about the reflective surface of things.
Yeah. And that is true. That from 2015 to today, that I haven't wavered on that one at all. And to elaborate, I think the point that I was making, it actually comes from just a deeper understanding of psychology, because that's something that I've learned over the years, where anybody can, I don't know, when I say anybody, many people have the possibility of going to an atelier or getting the right books and learning how to draw and make a piece of art, but the business and maneuvering a lifestyle around making art as much as possible and having it be the only, and removing the other distractions that you need to support yourself by using your art to support yourself. I think it takes a lot of, it takes a certain amount of talent, and but this day and age, and I'm sure it always has, it really takes a great degree of psychology. I don't think it wasn't until I started understanding human psychology that I would think I was able to really support myself just being a full-time artist and having no other distractions but making art. And it was just this, it's the psychology of, it's human psychology. It's really basic stuff, just how we make decisions. And we can kind of get into like the, is the reptile, like which part of the brain is making a decision, if it's more like the reptile or the mammal. But something that I learned probably around 2011 was the mechanics that happen in many of our minds, like when we make a decision, when we decide. Because when someone buys a piece of art, you make a sale of a piece of art because someone is finding it's more valuable to them than whatever money that you're asking for it. If the money that you're asking is less than the value somebody's getting from something, then most likely those are some of the dynamics of why someone would purchase something. But often I started getting really into trying to understand what they were like, what they were purchasing, what that is. Because as an artist, it's really easy to get, especially to this day and age with all the output options, you can get really involved in, the archivalness of the canvas, or the type of ink, or is it a lenticular or laser cut, or is it oil paint, or is it in a frame? Like artists, I find that I get often, it was easy to get focused and distracted on like the transaction of like an object, like one human making an object and giving that object to another person. Because it's obvious. I mean, it seems like that seems like that's the most obvious transaction that's happening, is this object. But what I started to realize is that what makes it's the process, or that little electrical spark that happens before that transaction, that's the most important. And when somebody is buying a painting, when really we're buying anything that we're buying, we're ultimately buying the experience of having that thing. And we're buying the experience of having that thing in the future. And so whether we're aware of it or not, when you're looking at a piece of art, you might think that you're buying that piece, whether it's like an investment, or whether you think it fits something that you need, or it really matches that couch, whatever it is. What you're really buying is you're buying the potential of the imaginary potential of yourself in the future with that thing. That's what you're always buying. You're buying that experience, and you're buying an experience of yourself. So once I understood that, I realized that part of being an artist and running a business, having a print store and an online presence, all those things, ultimately what I'm really selling is I'm selling enhanced future versions of people to themselves. I'm selling, look, when a couple is buying like a union print and they're hanging it in their house, I'm selling the potential versions of themselves, looking at this piece and reminding them of like the deeper truth of their love together in perpetuity. It's that moment of connecting with it. When I hang a Zavi piece in my kid's room, I'm connecting with myself and the joy I'm having, like watching them stare into the Zavular dimension and recognize like how familiar it feels. It has nothing to do with if it's canvas or if it's printed or if it's in a frame or how many of there are, or how much it's going to be worth in 5 years. All that stuff is kind of semantics. It's that future version that we go for. And if you can think about that in terms of that, if you're open to that being a dynamic, it really, for me, it definitely changed the kind of the how I view this game of being an artist. And I think it's made a positive difference in it.
Yeah. So interesting that this way of thinking precedes your own fatherhood. This is where we can sort of dogleg into that. Into dad mode. Yeah, because this show has always been, the tagline for this show has always been, be good ancestors. I'm still kind of too early in the process to know how, even though I've been thinking about all this stuff for years, how it's going to change as I enter into a daily praxis as a father, as an artist, and how that's going to change the way that I think about the work that I create. And I'm really curious to know how it has changed for you, if anything has changed, and like how you're, not not just the way you manage your time, but like has your motivation changed? Has your sense of the relationship between the material arts that you create and the creative work of parenting, like
Yeah.
what is all that for you?
Yeah. It's probably easier to say that um, absolutely nothing has stayed the same. There's nothing about my life that is exactly the same as it was before kids. There's like not a molecule of it has remained. So, and in the best way possible. But yeah, whatever those I think changes are going to be different for every individual that goes from a non-parent to a successful breeder. But for me, there's parts of my life and some of the routines I've tried to hold on to a little tighter. There's things that definitely kind of resemble the past, but I think it's a tectonic shift of consciousness to enter into from the perspective of a father to where it was just like 3 years ago. Now I've got two kids now, so we just doubled down on that. And it's, I guess I can think of there's when you ask that there's some highlight, I could pick out some highlights of it that stand out as, because there's so many changes. It's like we could never, I don't know I don't even think I could remember all of them, but the ones that relate to being an artist, I think might be interesting.
Yeah.
One change, like a material, objective kind of protocol change, was when I started painting with Nova. And she was a little over a year. It was once you could start standing, then we started drawing. Like I would draw in bed and she would come over and be super curious about it. But I think once she was able to stand, that's when we actually started, like I set up a little studio outside for her in the barn. And during the summer, I have all these rolls of canvas from the printing business that we would use, and just it's just like watching the consciousness, watching her young, fresh, open consciousness, be like play music or jazz music, and just seeing it react creatively with colors and shapes in just like the pure joy of making it. Like not only did the experience of seeing this like pure creative spirit unfold, as incredibly inspiring that was, it kind of rekindled a whole new appreciation for the entire spectrum of physical art tools, like from tempera to watercolors to crayons to clay to paint, from an actual, we mentioned the electro mineralism, but from the molecular, like I got to understand, I try to engage their brains as much as possible with different things, because in this first 3-year period, it's a really important time where there's so much brain development. You just don't want to leave any of those like developing, exploding like neurons on the table. And I realized that like I could put her in front of an iPad or a Wacom, and she's played around with it. She's seen me use it, but I really don't. I try to stay away. I use that if we're on like an airplane or something, or if we can make a mess, I'd rather make a mess than use the iPad. And just from the level of, despite how many possibilities there are within a digital realm, just the molecular complexity of like thick, loopy, day-glow tempera paint, like in her hands, like that, I believe that like the experience of that and feeling the texture of the paper and watching the colors mix, it was like a higher dimensional variable of learning experience for her. And seeing that happen, it kind of rekindled the whole, like I've kind of gone way deeper back into my kind of traditional art and roots, because seeing it new for her made it new for me again at the same time. You start thinking a lot more long term about things. I feel like, as in terms of, I guess in the context of a visionary art, it's so much easier for me the trajectory of my future expectations and imagined probabilities feels so much longer than it was before. Even if it's only, and not like I'm talking like I can see things in 15 years. I can plan things for 15 years. Like, oh, this is what I want to be doing in 15 years. 3 years ago, you could have asked me where I saw myself in 5 years, and I had no idea. You know, I didn't. It was one of the most like uncomfortable questions. It's like 5 years, but now the horizon seems farther away, which is exciting. There's sometimes it feels like your consciousness just has to expand to like envelop theirs, because now you think about, as an individual, we spend a lot of time thinking about ourselves and the things we're doing and what we're going to do and how we're planning, and all the thoughts that come in between seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, the full spectrum of that. And now when I think about Nova and Escher, I think about creating a safe, like the safest, most nurturing, like field of probability around them that I can, that it's within my domain to do. And it's great. I don't know. There's something that feels like this is what I should be thinking about, and it feels good to think like that.
There's a lot there, but I do want to draw attention to your emphasis on the tactile with teaching your kids to create artwork, and that there is something, there's a pretty strong argument from the sciences that because of self-organization as a way of accelerating the entropy of our universe, that it's just like metabolisms just emerge only to hasten the heat death of the cosmos, according to the orthodox sort of contemporary view. It's a really sort of depressing picture in some respects, because it suggests that the whole tilt of technological evolution is towards the convenient, towards the compressed version of what came before, finding the quicker way to do it. And, as somebody who really found his legs in digital media, it's obvious that even though you may spend as much time at work on a given piece as a traditional painter, like certain things are definitely faster, to the degree to which like a different quantity becomes a different quality. There's like a phase change when you're like placing objects with like ZBrush in a three-dimensional landscape compared to like trying to like get the shading right on the side of that barn, with a brush. And yet that's sort of just one symptom of this. I feel like we're sliding downhill into a world in which and this is where I sort of betray my conservatism, I suppose, where we've sort of lost sight of the richness and the high fidelity, multidimensional human experience. And then like by the time we're all sort of uploading ourselves into computers and 3D printing babies and such, which I don't regard that as technologically impossible. I regard it as philosophically undesirable. That it's like we're gonna forget, that you can listen to vinyl instead of an MP3. But I'm really curious, where you sit in your thinking on analog and digital and the uses of those things. Especially because some of the work of yours that I've seen that has moved me the most is some of your older stuff that was executed in like pencil.
Sure. Well, to invoke the legendary Ken Wilber, just gotta transcend and include, baby. Transcend and include. Just because we've lost sight of it doesn't mean it's not still there to be seen. And with all these the new possibilities can give an entirely new life to old possibilities. And just in terms of a narrow focus of art mediums and tools, the things that, like, when I have a creative idea, like the plethora of the different means that I can execute that, whether it's like whether I want to get the concept of if you have an idea or something that's immediate that has a higher kind of like a brain cell, like expiration date, like you've got pencils and you've got paper. If you want to work it out, but you still feel like you want to involve like your body, there's like canvas and charcoal. There's things that like using ZBrush has given me a different appreciation for how I create form and inform like how my imagination works and then what I draw. And drawing something out gives me the ability to explore it in a really like organic, non-committal way. Or I could I could use a bunch of charcoal and chalk, and then I can spray some acetone on it, and I can hit it with the air compressor. And I've got these crazy shapes that are so analog and so sophisticated and all have their own like natural molecular little Voronoi patterns going on. Or I can then see how amazing that is and try my best to make some sort of like a recreation of that within the material editor of Unreal Engine. I'll say, what it is too with the tools. So I do a lot of VR now, and I've been going hard on VR for 3 years. What VR, the things that this technology, I haven't gotten lost in it. I've definitely lost sight of. I've lost track of a lot of time inside of it, for sure. But the deepest experience that I've had, when we started developing Microdose, the first like major sort of like breakthrough VR moment I had was while I was testing out one of the earliest prototypes of Microdose, and we had just introduced like our first kind of like a particle mechanic, and it was like just a transcendental like journey, fetal position, crying, laughing, reflection. Every shape became like I was watching a movie and directing the movie and acting in the movie and narrating it, and simultaneously. Like, it was all this one experience, and it was so powerful. And when I took the headset off, it was like sunrise. It was summer. It was like sometime like kind of midsummer, and the sun was just coming up, and I had to run out. My first impulse was to run outside and like dive into like the wet, dewy grass and rip handfuls of it out of the ground and just feel the just like the ultimate, like the symphony and molecular like opera and chemistry of like what was happening, and like the particle count of the grains of sand and the subsurface scattering on the pieces of grass, and like what's the PBR of this wet leaf. It's like it made VR is only it's not only, but I think it's exponentially increased my appreciation for the physical world, the electro, mineral, chemical, petrol, flora, molecule world that we live in. And that understanding, I think, adds value to a multitude of cascading decisions and philosophies around that experience.
Ken Wilber, actually, since you brought him up, he said something in a conversation once that really stuck with me. He was quoting Rene Magritte, and Magritte said, every painting starts as a romance and ends as a rape. And he was, just talking about the gap between the vision and the thing itself, the translation of that vision, and, the way that these revelations and insights are filtered through not only our technical facility or the limitations of our media, but just also our ability to remember the detail of these powerful experiences. There's all of these grates, these sieves that the vision has to pass through first. And I'm curious, like Venosa, who, by the way, I don't think I ever complimented you on the memorial painting that you did of Bob Venosa in the digital version of his own style, which I was like such an ole.
Yeah, I really miss him. I met him when I was 16. He grew up. As I was growing up in Colorado, his studio house was like 3 blocks up the hill from my Catholic school. Growing up.
That's convenient.
Yeah, I met him at an art book signing at Art Hardware, and there was like nobody there. Like, I don't know. the visionary scene was, there weren't as many crystals and pins and wooks on Pearl Street back in I don't know, like 80, 87 than there are right now. It's changed pretty dramatically.
Yeah, but so he talked about this too, about how he spent his entire career, kind of chasing this one ayahuasca vision that he had at the very beginning. So I guess the question is, what lives in that gap for you? What do you wish that you could do that with all of your servers and virtual reality setups and this, massive team of collaborators and all of the training and the talent that you have? Like, where do you feel, what do you wish that you could do that you find yourself still incapable of doing as an artist?
Man, there's a lot of things that I think that it's a combination. There's sometimes where an experience that contrasts that happens, but what also happens is sometimes it's almost, we're getting at a point where there are more things that I want to learn that I just do not, my brain does not have the capacity and the time and the discipline to understand all of them.
Oof.
Like even just from a software perspective, like the time it would take to truly master Houdini and Unreal and ZBrush and a Cinema 4D or to really have to go as to express all of them to a high degree of their potential value together. It's almost like that's frustrating to me sometimes. It's also frustrating that I want to be able to paint in VR in low Earth orbit as well too.
Yes.
I mean, I want there's things I want to be able to. Yeah, okay, we're going here. Yeah, I feel that we're very close to what I create for the future that I'm plotting for myself, that I put energy and time towards, building through Microdose or through different software, is manipulating, is the real time physical manipulation of almost marionetting and puppeteering massive holograms over stadiums or large open wide vista environments. That's the thing that's but I feel it's really not that far away from an AR and we're talking about probably an AR perspective. You'd wear glasses and you'd look at this. You wouldn't be adjusting. And then I guess later on, I guess it would be pretty cool to light up all the molecular photons and that at that scale too. But it seems that, if I can put it in the mind, with art, and I think a lot of art, we're kind of creating these illusions that really come alive in the consciousness of another person. And whether that's a huge projective, there is something you could sculpt out of huge drones and things too.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say, I'm incredibly satisfied at this moment with the massive upgrade in medium that we got from VR 3 years ago. When you look for VR and the leaps and bounds that groups like NVIDIA are making with the graphics cards, the Moore's law of consumer graphics cards that are available and the types of math that they make possible now is, if that's not enough for you to get your mind around and appreciate on that level, then what are you excited about?
Dude,
what are the things?
Yeah, okay. Well, let me put a pin in the follow-up question I had for you. I think
I'll tell you, I'm excited about learning.
Yes.
I'm excited about, the projects the 15-year projects I have are art school. It's art school, art lab, maker space, making art with kids and teaching kids how to give them the largest probability field of expressing their the closest they can come to their creative potential. Is the most, that's the biggest idea. That's the most important, most time sensitive, most urgent, and highest ROI kind of endeavor that I can think about. And that takes I can't do that for many reasons at the moment. It takes, because those are ideas that take years to develop, and there's lots of materials and cranes and shipping containers and domes and things, but I don't worry about those are details too. So, but those are the things that I think about the most. And I think about how this technology can, with technology that's coming, being able to rent the time of a supercomputer, the processing power of that, the distributed, the type of the fact that hardware, that the power of hardware can be distributed over different multiple machines in different places. There's a lot less restrictions, and it feels like a lot more almost available. There's going to be a higher degree of kind of democratization between the availability of these type of tools, and how what a decade of, I think we're seeing this big shift now. Is between whatever we were calling art before we figured out that we're going to be calling art immersive. I don't know when art hasn't been immersive, but now there's a refocus on the immersiveness of creativity, and seeing the different spectrums of creative disciplines start to rediscover themselves within new mediums is really, that's a really exciting thing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something, I guess there's, to answer your question, I guess there's a couple, there's maybe a threefold thing. One is obviously, the child as a collaborator, or the child as work, and I just get excited about all of the things that you were just talking about introducing art, and loading this kid culturally with things to see how much further she can get earlier than I did, because I really believe that it's the complexity, the intelligence of an organism has so much to do with the complexity of its environment. And if we, up to the point where it's too much, and, you sort of burn up it's kind of an Icarus type deal, you're putting your hand in a blender beyond a certain point. But
you got at some point you got to figure out if you're going to be Icarus or Daedalus.
Right.
That's a big decision. There's a big shift from. That's a good metaphor from child to father. Yeah.
So really reading, that piece of the creative enterprise, and then also the sort of the backflow, getting to learn. I think something that has come up for me recently, this is the part 2 of that, is, having a kid is a meditation on my own childhood, and how it's in a lot of ways, I feel like it's a return to form for me. It's drawing me back down through the tree into the trunk of the tree, out of the branches, into the primary considerations of my life. And I'm returning to all of these things that I used to care about, but I've sort of lost sight of in the last few years of just trying to, hustle and make it in the world. And, so as someone who believes very passionately, and I'm working on making an articulate argument that the future of humankind is actually, in some respects, our past, in the sense that a more complex, fluid, metamorphic world requires us to remain childlike, to remain flexible and social and open, and to engage ever with this beginner's mind. That there's this sense in which it is, I like you, I'm excited about the possibilities of my own learning, and my own deepening sort of freshness with engagement of all of these things, like the guitar or paints or just conversation that I feel like I've taken for granted lately. But then also, when you talk about Microdose as something that gives people a sense of your experience as an artist, of like being in the, the like this swirl of sorcery, just uh, really getting to immerse oneself in a creative flow state with almost no training, very little like rudimentary sort of experimental play. That, it seems as though, and lots of people have talked about this, that the more sophisticated our technologies, our tools become, it's almost like I don't think that this is exactly true, but there is a vector in which we are doing away with the need for mastery. The intelligence is more distributed into the people that have designed these tools, and it leaves us, in some sense, more helpless, to the degree that we rely on them. But in other ways, like just the number of people that are producing music now because of the apps that have made music production accessible to your average teenager is just extraordinary. And, there's something in that balance between the freshness and the ever-living renewal available through a real engagement, like a wisdom level engagement with a particular technique, like mastering paint. But then there's also this other thing, which is that there's, we're coming into this space where we can just sort of drop ourselves into profound creative acts with like no training. You're contributing to this. You're participating in it.
Oh, this has been one of the primary, the pursuit of this question is like one of the primary drives and like loves of like my entire life. And I think that, on some levels, it's like, ultimately you're trying to, I think whatever tool you choose, like the real game is the mastery of yourself. And a lot of these tools, the creative process, drawing and painting, it represents the friction that my consciousness is most comfortable exploring itself with. And, whether that is ink or clay or Play-Doh or crayons, it's like one of those levels. There's different ways of looking at that. I think at the argument that you're making too. On one hand, sure, we have maybe more dilettantes and less crystallized, focused mastery of one medium, but at the same time, another view, when I hear that, I think more people making music and access to tools. My first thought is yay, and that's awesome. And that it's if you want, I guess do you want to look at the individual's own story arc as an artist and what the highest level output that they're going to achieve, or zoom out and just see like, wow, look at the increased amount, look at the graph of the increased amount of creative expression that these tools made possible. And sometimes it's not about taking the most, like the human being that had the best genetic jackpot slot machine, social, communal, like global privilege to be an artist. Yes, you could, like, if you could pull out your Da Vinci's and your like Leonardo's. But I feel that grabbing somebody off the sidelines and bringing them into creative experience, like giving them that gift at a greater volume, is potentially a higher use of my time than an individual. Than being the I'm not going to make a decision. So the options are, yes, pull someone off the bleachers, or take somebody, or focus all your energy on taking one individual to like total mastery of the finish line.
So what do you like? Where are you with like apprenticeship then, and that kind of thing, and in these new spaces?
I feel like for a while, like there's an opportunity for someone in my life that would be like a kind of like a right hand for the left brain, or a left brain to the right hand. Okay, how about that? But a lot of I feel that there is information that I have. There's things that I'm discovering that, like, wow, if someone else was here right now, I could totally teach them how to do this. I feel like I'm always teaching somebody in my head, whether I'm like reteaching myself. Um, but
The world.
that's Whoa.
Sorry, go on.
I guess maybe when the teacher's ready, the student appears too. So.
Hmm.
But for years we've done. I feel like doing. I think the first artist is doing more teaching. I feel like I have some things. There's some tricks that I like teaching tricks, not necessarily like general overarching like long-term theory. I like teaching like the tricks and the hacks and the things that I've learned. So we're getting to a point where I need to start probably purging some of that to like make room to like learn new things.
Mm. Yeah, what you said about there being sort of too many things to learn, too little time. It's like, I'm going to get real heady about this for a second. Listeners, I apologize, but you've made it an hour in, so, I've earned your trust. There's this thing that I've been obsessed with since I heard about it in college, which was the evolution of the sentence. Like at what point in human evolution did we move from words, where we were just uttering one word for like lion, one word for hey sexy, one word for every imaginable relevant scenario, and every experience that we could recognize and desire to communicate. And then at some point, the social complexity of a human tribe or something got to the point where we needed more. The number of words that we had to remember was a tax on our memory, and it increased the miscommunications that we were having with each other, like not remembering the right word for the right thing. And so it became easier. This is all Martin Nowak's work. He came up with the math supporting that even though we couldn't look at fossils of the human throat and like larynx and voice box, it is like there was a point, and we can talk about it with chaos theory, where the error rate in our communication required, rather than just adding new words, finding a new structure for words that allowed us to recombine them in novel ways and to create a syntax. And so that's when, really language as we think of it, as humans think of it, emerged at some point, some mysterious, prehistoric moment. And I feel like all of the things that you're talking about, like all the ways that all of these media illuminate and inform and fold into one another, and the fact that each of us is sort of like struggling to learn everything that we might want to learn in order to communicate the things that we might want to communicate is a singularity of the same sort of order. That like virtual reality, and I'm certainly not the first person to say this, but like the virtual reality is sort of like opera in that it folds all prior media together into this new syntax, and that there's like a new language that's emerging where we have to collaborate at a much higher level because each of us is so partial compared to the total possibility of human creativity now, that. So like, where are you with, obviously Samskara is a fantastic example of interdisciplinary collaboration. Microdose is a fantastic example. Like, how do you understand not just your work as an artist unto yourself, but your work as part of like a super organism, a liquid brain of creators?
Yeah. I think it's maybe in the broadest sense when I think about, like, let's take for example the new things that are happening with the new possibilities with the virtual reality. He mentioned that. I really liked how he said it was really like it's folding all prior things, and within that fold, it's also becoming this larger container. So it's a container for all these prior things, and you could also consider that the container. What it's really what it's doing, it's containing. It's a contained feedback loop technology. It's this 2 monitor pixel resolution feedback machine for. It's almost like when they can come. It's like a distributor cap. Like it distributes your own biofeedback and the own feedback loop of your own conscious within a tighter container that can contain more and express more information and take up your full visual audio senses. That's like the canvas of what VR is. But it's not just it's all the things happening together. It's the VR and it's the video cards that allow enough computations where we are going to have like the signal to noise ratio is going to soften till we have the closest like 1-to-1 digital feedback loop reflection of being able to take us, our actions, our movements, our heart rate, our EEG, our brain waves, and provide a 90 frame a second real-time reflection and distortion of the feedback loop of those elements back to ourselves. And there's a lot to learn when your friction of your consciousness against that kind of a medium.
Do you think of yourself differently now that like you spend more of your time immersed in these incredibly complex collaborations? Like obviously it's a very different world than, you like sitting outside the Sundowner on Pearl Street and like sketching people,
I was at Pearl Street today. Yeah, for sure. I thought about today. Totally different. Right. Totally different. This feels like when I'm in it, there's a lot of it that I'm starting to understand. There's things I thought I understood about it that I didn't. That now I realize, I didn't really understand that as much as I thought I did. So it is an unfolding process, but it's a totally different type of flow state to get into too. It's not. I'll honestly say a lot of VR development is really not romantic type stuff. It's like lots of numbers and thinking and getting lost, and like you'll spend days like trying to create this thing that you thought you could create, and it ends up like completely you can lose days on like the wrong thread of a trajectory. It's just like that was a half-baked idea that was too ambitious. But the payoff moments that I've seen, like the amount of form from a color shape with Microdose, it's a very visual product. It's really focuses on a high degree of like materials and shaders and meshes and geometry, and the novel ways of combining those with like different light sources and environments. So from like the visual level, like the color therapy, visual form level of getting a picture and a form inside my brain, it feels better than anything I could imagine doing right now with time and with creative time and resources. It consistently has been delivering that for me, and the pursuit of that is what is the most what's the most exciting.
So it's like multicellularity worked out better for everybody, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
like you got Fong and Blue Tech and all these other folks working with you.
I also say like when Microdose started, like one of the things that I love about it is that the idea of it was good enough of an idea for me to justify calling Fong and saying, Fong, you should work on this with me. Like it was a project worthy of Fong's genius, because I've known Fong for like 14 years and we worked on things together, but I've just admired him from afar for so long. But I never had like a real justifiable reason for us to work together until we came up. VR was ambitious enough that it was like, yep, that's Fong worthy. So just working with Fong is such a gift too. He's an amazing person to reflect with. He's at the farm right now. He's in the barn. I'm out in the Airstream.
Well, send him my regards. I will. I think I will laugh to my grave about the time I came out to visit the two of you like 2.5 years ago to talk about how I imagined integrating musical performance into Microdose, and he just looked at me like, "Are you out of your fucking skull? Like, do you realize what it takes to code this shit?" So there's like a shout out to the engineers and the coders and the people that are
Unsung, the real unsung
Yeah.
heroes of this entire creative movement.
Yeah. So I want to flip it just a little because
Mm.
I almost never ask this question on this show, but it's often I think it's because people are so quick to surface their own sort of anxieties when I talk about the future. But I'm really curious. You're such a creative firestorm and force of inspiration for so many people. And I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. Like this is a fact. Um,
Mm.
but like I know that in your life that you've had to do a tremendous amount of like confrontation with your own darkness and your own fear. And I'm curious, after all of that has burned away and left you as the man you are, what are you still afraid of about the future? Like what still, like what if anything still haunts you?
Mm. What haunts me now? One of the things that's is semi-haunting that you'll be experiencing, you haven't experienced for soon enough, is there's some fear about the joy to grief ratio of the human experience. The idea that the love that I'm able to experience with my daughter Nova and Escher it's unlike any type of love that I ever thought was possible. Like it's redefined my whole concept of what it really means to love something just all the way. That like fairy tale movie, you and me, kid forever love. Like I don't think I ever really, I've never, whatever I've had in the past, it was shattered with the way I love my kids and feeling how amazing that love feels, and knowing that part of that love has the potential to balance itself with an equal amount of grief and suffering, and the awareness that the of the relationship between them, and future and death and loss and letting go of everything. I'd say that scares me about the future. But I stopped predicting, like giant asteroids and portals into other dimensions, like after the 2012 fucking fallout, got duped on that one. So I listen to less conspiracy theory radio these days, I guess. But
Yeah, I do. I remember
that's it.
meeting you in Santa Fe. It's just a weird coincidence that like the day I drove in to start work here, you were like, you hit me up by text. You were like, "Hey, you live here now, right?" I was like, "What the? How did you know?" And we were hanging out. We went out for breakfast, and you said something about getting an ultrasound. It'd be like MK ultrasound.
Yeah.
It's like,
I will say that I haven't given up all of my fantasies. Don't get too close to my fantasy, Michael. Okay, so we're all entitled to our own mythology
hey,
around things for sure.
I mean, frankly, I wrote a song that I've never published, but I wrote a song about just being terrified of being constantly penetrated by electromagnetic radiation, and like, where in the world can I go to get away from all of that? And like, I
Yeah.
rejoiced. I rejoiced when I found out they made oh, sorry, go ahead.
You're going to use before I forget. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of like, the day they start doing like the chemtrail vaccines. Like that's a scary like drones that spray out like mandatory vaccines on humans. That's a scary thing about the future. Is that scary enough?
Yeah, presumably
Okay.
by then we'll all have universal basic income, right? So
Oh, cool.
it'll be
Cool.
like manna from.
Healthcare.
It'll just be like
Right.
Bitcoin and vaccines from heaven.
Oh,
Just
great. Uh-huh.
not the place I want to end this conversation. I did want to say though that there's
Advertising in VR. I'm afraid of like once the
ooh,
marketers like really sink their teeth into that and
ooh,
creative futures.
dude,
It just gives me the shivers
the
at times.
neuromarketing, like walk past a
Oh
Coke
man.
machine that can read your brain waves and like fuck,
Uh,
like
yeah.
ugh.
The points where like in the future, in the universal income that we're just like selling out our consciousness to like marketers for freedom credits, like that kind of stuff freaks me out.
Man, how is that not already the case? Like, it's funny how
Why haven't we monetized? Why isn't there like a gold standard for like human attention based off geographical area? Like, shouldn't we be able to monetize our attention at this point where like we could actually just like sell it on an open market? You know, for the amount of money that people are paying to get it, I think that we should at least establish a value and like a minimum requirement. Like, fuck you, you don't get my attention unless I'm getting this much value, period. You know,
well, I think
stand up for that.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, that's one area. You know, I know you've given a lot of thought to, you know, various blockchain things, and that's one area where I feel like, you know, everything is flipped upside down right now because we decided, you know, we being the people that designed the software environment that we live in now, decided that we were going to try and achieve the sort of liberal goals of the 90s cyberdelic movement by making the internet free. But the way to do that was to make everything based on ad revenue. And that, you know, I have a lot of hope for blockchain being able to like invert that equation and restore individual value creation to the user, you know, and like, I'm going to sell you my data, which you can't have because you didn't build the platform. We built the platform, and everything we do, you know, we find all the ways to make every little action that we do generate electricity and secure some sort of encryption algorithm. And, you know, it's like, I don't know. I think seeing the problem clearly is you're like 95% of the way to the solution, right? So that just the fact that we're both so like palpably disgusted by this stuff, I think is like evidence that the boil is about to pop. But, you know.
Yeah. And I think it happens once we become aware and have a higher value around our own consciousness, and like we have to prove that it's more valuable than that and treat it and respect it. And I think that's part of the problem solution there.
Yeah. Well, dude, I want to wrap this with a question that I like to ask folks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if there's something about this show that it started in this contemplation with the tea fairy about every moment being all at once, you know, and that like the future is paying attention to our heroic deeds, you know, that we're in some weird way, we're all sort of like live streaming ourselves to the unborn, and that they're super interested in everything that we do because this was a moment of great transition and a moment where we didn't leave very excellent records. And so this thought of like living our lives in light of that fact, I find everyone has a sort of a different take on it. Everyone has a unique reflection on what it means if you live moment to moment as though the future is watching or listening lovingly, you know, not like it's over. Like they can't hurt you, right? Like they're just curious about you. So like, what does that kind of consideration do for you? Does that change the way that you live? If it does, how? And what kind of message do you hope to leave for those people you'll never meet?
I think as an artist, I think about stuff like that when if you're like going through a museum and you like look at like artists painting, or you look at like the body of work, because like there's no individual thing I think you can do that would ever answer that question, but I think you have to look at like actions over long periods of time, and the feeling and the presence when you kind of understand a larger body of work for somebody. And I think what the things that have in the past, there's like pre-dad things I valued and post-dad things that I valued, and the things that I used to always look for like passion and obsession. I'd like to see the level of commitment the artist had to like the focus and vision and the direction of what they're putting their energy into. And I think in the past I kind of confused passion. I think the lines between like passion and obsession and psychosis I wasn't really distinguishing between, like, those were not one of the things I was distinguishing. It was just like overall like shock and awe and effect. And now, as I've grown, I'm 41 now, and as I've grown, and as these two children and my beautiful partner have reflected for me, it's like now I look at the pieces, and what I'm looking for now is like, man, how much love did this person like have in, at first, like, it's binary. It's like, did this artist like love themselves, or did this artist like not love themselves? Like, I can see like how much of this obsession was like cannibalizing their own self-destruction. And am I looking at that, or can I see like the peace in somebody's heart that was made to create this? Can I see the amount of, like, is it taking energy, or is the idea of it, I think it can be summed up by like regeneration. I think that's more of a value than has ever been in my life. And the idea of aligning and encouraging and celebrating acts of energetic or creative, biological, like regenerative, to create more than you take, and to be part of like a larger system that supports more generations, and another generation, and your generation, and our generation, our next generation, all together. I like to think of whatever movement or message or impact, I pray and I hope it lines up on that side of history.
That's awesome. Thanks for taking the time on this, Andrew. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Oh, thanks for great questions, Michael.
Yeah. Good luck with all your things.
Thanks. And thanks for the attention of everyone that listens to this show in the future.
Yeah, right on.
And thanks to everybody that I love, and my family, and my children, and my community, and my team, and you, and all the amazing work that you do, Michael. Thank you so much.
Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. Future Fossils is part of the MindPod network, along with Third Eye Drops, the Astral Hustle, Synchronicity Podcast, and an oodle of other fascinating programs. I encourage you to go to mindpodnetwork.com and subscribe to them all. And stay tuned, because we have some awesome episodes coming up on Future Fossils. But for now, may your now be exquisite, long, and wonderful.